Welcome to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. I'm Ed Holinsky. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have another terrific guest. This gentleman from the Mohawk Valley, the Utica Valley, the Rome, New York Valley. This gentleman grew up in the LaSalle area of Niagara Falls. We'll be going into the Greater Niagara Sports Hall of Fame in the next couple of weeks. Please welcome the one and the only John Pitarresi. How are you, John?
Terrific, Ed. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You're an interesting character. You're an interesting cat. And the reason why I say that is that you've enjoyed a sports writing career well over 50 years, but your high school career was rather interesting as well, too, starting off at Bishop Duffy and then LaSalle High School. And then you managed to play lacrosse when it wasn't a high school sport, and then went on to enjoy a good career in football, baseball, and lacrosse at Hamilton College. So where to begin? I guess we begin in the beginning and how you grew up in the Niagara Falls area.
Yeah. Well, the number one thing is my father had been an outstanding football player at Niagara University before and after World War II. And he coached there for a couple of years. Actually, the last couple of years, they had a team. Jim Miller was his last head coach, and he went on to coach at Boston College in the 50s, into the 60s, I think. But I can remember being on the field at Hyde Park Stadium when I was 4 years old, when my father was coaching the Niagara Falls High School JV football team. And something I'm going to mention in my talk at the Hall of Fame, Armin Cacciatore, Frank Scaletta, who later coached me, Tommy Manzi, all these guys. And I'm going to joke that all their names ended in a vowel, and Sicilians were preferred. But I remember these guys very well, and they were like gods to me. I thought every football player was very handsome and pure of heart, right? So, and I remember going in the locker room, and my mother would be up in the stands with my brother and sister, who were twins, who were a year and a half younger than I was. But I'd go in the locker room, and back in those days, they'd cut up oranges and have them on the benches, for the players at halftime. I'd be eating the oranges, and guys would be stepping on me. Oh, look out, kid, So that was my first exposure to sports. And I can remember going with my father to Niagara when Varsity Stadium was still there. I mean, they no longer were playing football. But it was like, oh, well, look at this stadium. Look, I thought it was Yankee Stadium, So that was what started it all. And going, my father would play softball and basketball at the Knights of Columbus and all that kind of stuff. So my brother and I, that's how we got our start. We'd go with my father when he coached at Niagara Falls, he coached at LaSalle, and then he got into administration. He couldn't coach anymore. But that's how we got started. And then, when I was a little kid, we lived on 9th Street in Niagara Falls, about a mile from the falls. And the first sports things we did play wiffle ball. When wiffle ball first came out, which I think was 1953, Eddie Cassidy, the Cassidys down the street, had a barn in the backyard. We played wiffle ball back there. You hit it over the barn, it was a home run. I never did, but then we played tackle football on the lawn at 10th Street School. The Cassidys and the Bobo boys, all of whom were very good athletes, and Billy Bobo's in Niagara Falls Hall of Fame, played at Duffy and Xavier University. And that was, then when I was 9 years old, we moved up to LaSalle, and I lived a block from 79th Street School. So from 4th grade until we were 16 or 17, we were on the playground at 79th Street School constantly. We played baseball. Well, we couldn't use a baseball. They wouldn't let you use a baseball. And we had to use a rubber ball. And you'd have to take up a collection every day to buy a new one, because either it would fall apart, or we called it Jockstrap Stadium because the guy across the street would take our ball if we hit it in his yard. We called him old Mr. Jockstrap, right? So we were there. So we played ball all day. We played basketball all night. I can remember my father drive over at midnight. What are you guys doing? Playing ball. He goes, get on home. It was midnight. But we climbed up on top of the school and bent the security light down on the court so we could see. And I mean, we had one year we had a Vic Siegels, who was later the athletic director he was at Arizona State and Temple, but he was the boss at Long Beach State for a long time. He's a Hall of Famer, terrific baseball and basketball guy at Bucknell. His father ran the boys club, and he had boxing gloves and headgear, right? So we organized a boxing tournament, and everybody chickened out but Mickey Kearns and myself. Mickey was a terrific fullback at Villanova and really good athlete. And he had me by about 30 pounds, but we were both pretty scared, So we went at it, and I remember he hit me in the forehead. I swear it hurt for a week, but none of the other guys would fight. Our neighborhood was pretty easy going. There were very, very few fights. The guy with the worst temper was me. I was always a poor sport and so on, but never gotten any, maybe one or two fights, like in all those years. We were considered nice guys, But anyway, that was the start of the whole sports thing, and it had a lot of very good friends like Vic Siegels and Mickey Kearns and Billy Bradshaw and later Joe Colosi, and these guys all went on to major college programs, So keeping up with them either got better or got out, I guess, but the funny thing is, and I'm going to say this, I said, I knew very early that they were better athletes than I was. So I had to outsmart them, but it wasn't that hard to outsmart them. I mean, that was the start of it.
You were one of 10. You were saying you were one of 10 kids in your family.
Yeah, I was the eldest of 10. Yeah.
So did you set the bar high for your family, or was it the bar? Where did you set the bar?
I mean, as far as being out there and competing and so on, I'd say yes. But my younger brothers were all better athletes than I was. My brother Jerry, who's a year and a half younger than I am, was a all-East safety at Hamilton College, made the all-New York State team. He was a terrific baseball player. My brother Charlie was an excellent receiver at LaSalle. My brother Michael was a terrific receiver at LaSalle, but I think he got kicked out of 3 games. He was very much a rabble rouser. If he didn't start the trouble, he certainly aimed to finish it, So my younger brothers I recognized, I knew they were better athletes than I was. So I tried to work hard and be smart and be a coach's kid, that always helps. And so if I set the bar high, it was only in terms of participation, and I think they all outdid me in one way or another.
Want to ask you, you talked about Sandlot. Were you ever involved in any organized football programs in the falls, like Tyro or?
There weren't any. As far as football, there weren't any at that time.
Okay.
None of the guys at the playground played in any organized football before junior high. When I went to Bishop Duffy, the guys who went to public school, at that time, now they have, modified football 7th, 8th, and sometimes 9th grade. At that time, the 7th and 8th graders did not play freshman football unless even if they were really talented, I don't think they did. So I went to Bishop Duffy. There was no freshman team. And this is terrific. There's no freshman team, so we had to play JV. So more than 100 guys. This is the fall of 1962. And Mike Nyland, the Nyland family is a very, very well-known Western New York sports family, as you know, from Tonawanda and originally Lockport. But so Mike Nyland's the head coach, and he had mercy on me that more than 100 guys went out for the team. There were only 30 uniforms. So he's got all the guys in the stands, and you get a uniform. He points at me. Well, he knew my dad. I think that's the only reason he gave me a uniform. So I go down there. We had old Niagara University uniforms. Niagara had given up football 12 years before. The helmet I got, they were, honest to God now, people laugh at this and say I'm full of it, but a leather helmet with the ear flap falling off. Really, honest to God. But Duffy's colors were red and white. Our uniforms were purple and white. So, because Niagara, right? But here's what happened. They let the other guys who didn't get a uniform go to practice every day, and they just run for 2 hours. And every day, 3 or 4 guys would quit, and guys would run down and get a uniform. And at the end of the season, there were 18 guys left. Me, my cousin Ern Venuto, Mickey Kearns, who's our best player by far, terrific, Terry Cummings, Mike McDermott, Ernie Bevilacqua, who was a junior. We were all freshmen for the most part, and we got killed. I weighed 114 pounds. Jimmy Ozip, it was a good little halfback, weighed 98 pounds. So that was the first organized football that I played or any of my friends played.
Then you moved on to LaSalle High School and played ball there. What was it like playing at LaSalle, first of all, that LaSalle experience? And what was it like playing in the old Niagara Frontier League?
Well, my teams at LaSalle were not very good. We had some good players. We always felt like we were decent defensively and couldn't score much. But the NFL was hyper competitive, terrific athletes. I'll tell you what, the best game we ever played, there was a scrimmage every year against Bishop Duffy. And my senior year, we scrimmaged them, and it was a war. And we won that game on a late touchdown. Mickey Kearns is still mad about it. 6-0 or 7-0. We were 2-6 that year, and we had some very close games that I keep to this day, 60 years later. I keep hearing about NT beating us 41-0. And Fred Wawrzynek was obviously one of the best players I ever played against in any sport, just ran all over us. They ran, and they used to, I remember he ran a kickoff back, and I missed the tackle on the kickoff, and I don't know if he was coming up there like a steam engine, like a freight train, but he scored several times. I think he kicked the extra points too. In the kid who held for the extra points was Brownie. I can't remember. And I remember the Rosenau kid. Right. It was Greg Rosenau. Anyway, you remember they ran sometimes out of the single wing.
Right.
Yeah, but we were prepared for that. I don't think the single wing hurt us, but Fred Wawrzynek really hurt us. And Kenmore East, we had a very close game with Kenmore East. Their big star was Bob Rust, who was later outstanding linebacker at Syracuse. And Kenmore West got out of hand at the end. They had the Yakupovich kid, John Mahoney, Paul Santa Maria, Nick Minio. But we actually, that game, but we just couldn't score. So I think we lost to Lockport 7-6. We lost to Tonawanda 7-0. Niagara Falls High School 13-6. But there were so many good athletes on those teams, and it was tough keeping up with them. And I think the next year when my brother was a senior, LaSalle had a pretty good team. In fact, they beat NT, I believe, 7-0 for like the first time they beat them in maybe 10 years, or 8 or 9 anyway. But it was a very tough league. There were certainly no easy games. And, but you know what? I mean, the Catholic League at that time was tremendous as well. I mean, when we beat Duffy in that scrimmage, they went 7-1 that year. They had, of course, they rode Mickey's back. I mean, not that they didn't have other good players, but Mickey Kearns is a very close friend of mine. He was just a terrific football player. So there are a lot of good athletes around, and it was very tough competition.
Did it make any difference that you were playing smaller schools? Trot was around at that point, or bigger schools like Ken East, Ken West, North Tonawanda. I'm not sure if Lackawanna was still in the NFL at that point.
Lackawanna was 1964 was my junior year was their last season in the NFL. That year, we tied them 0-0 on our field. My buddy said it was the most boring football game he ever saw in his life. But I remember playing on their field, and it was like that was the worst football field I ever played on. I think it was all tin cans and beer bottles on that field. But yeah, it made a difference. I mean, our 2 wins that year were against Niagara Wheatfield and Trot. Well, I'll tell you a great one about Trot. They had a very good halfback named Billy Junebug Mark. And the week before our game, Billy had done something bad and he was incarcerated. Well, okay, we don't have to play against Junebug. Well, Friday night comes at Kenny Rowe Stadium, our stadium there behind the high school. There's Junebug, he
made bail.
Somewhere in the first quarter, he comes up the middle and he goes 80 yards to score. But then we had a guy named Jeff Dick who was very fast, and Jeff scored 3 touchdowns. We won 21-7. But yeah, Trot was at very much a disadvantage in that league because they're much smaller enrollment. But they had great athletes. They had some very, very good athletes. And I think Niagara Wheatfield, I don't know how big they were at the time. I think we beat them 20-0 or whatever. For us to score 3 touchdowns, some magic was going on, But yeah, there was definitely a difference. Hey, Ed, I remember when my father was coaching at LaSalle, before Kenmore split into 2 schools, they come running out on the field and it looked like the charge of the Light Brigade. I said, how many guys? I'm a little kid, 9, 10 years old. They looked like they had 200 guys on the team. They all looked really big, But then they split and they still had big schools. But the school, the one, to be honest with you, not just because you're from NT, the school that was always during our time that had a reputation be big and mean and tough was NT. And here's a great one about that. So we're there. I don't know if you remember this or they're still doing it when you were in school, but they'd introduce their team and they'd come running over to your sideline and be snarling at you and that, But I don't know how many of our guys felt intimidated. I mean, that was the intent, to intimidate you. I don't know how many. I wasn't, because I'd seen it many times before, and I knew what they were doing. So, maybe I should have been intimidated because they were very, very good at that time. But I always thought that was pretty funny. They'd run across. It'd be about 5 yards from your sideline, and just be snarling at you and everything. They had a really good lineman. Didn't he go to Boston College? I'm going to forget his name. He was a very tough guy. But anyway, they had a lot of tough guys, but I was very happy the next year when LaSalle beat them. My brother, Jerry, was the Western New York Player of the Week because he scored a touchdown, caught a couple passes, rushed pretty good, and intercepted a pass in the end zone at the end of the game. But beating NT was beating Niagara Falls obviously was number one goal. Beating NT was a big goal because we hadn't beaten them in years.
You talked about the Lackawanna field. What were some of the other memorable fields that you played on for football, good or bad?
I'm going to have a hard time. Our own field was pretty good. Lockport's field, I'm going to forget the name of it. But it always seemed to me they didn't cut the grass, like it was long and it'd catch in your spikes. And I go, what, like, get out of here. I mean, like, I don't know if they did that on purpose to slow people down or what, I hated that field, Our own field I thought was very good. I don't really have any memory. The Hyde Park Stadium field was okay, but it got beat up because they played a lot of games. Niagara Falls played there, Trot played there, both their JV teams played there. Maybe South Junior and North Junior played there, probably. So that field got beat up pretty good. The other fields I don't really remember, but I'll never forget Lockport. It's like it seemed they let that grass grow, or maybe they just didn't have enough money to get it cut. But that was a bit of a pain.
Got to ask you something. It's kind of a touchy subject, but back in the 60s in race relations, probably really good in Niagara Falls. But once you got out of Niagara Falls and you played elsewhere, things could get a little dicey, things could get a little touchy, things could get a little nasty. What do you recall about that?
Well, my senior year, we didn't have any black players. For several years before that, we had 3, 4, 5, 6 guys, right? Niagara Falls High School always had a certain number of black players, and Trot had a lot of black players. It was unfortunate for us that we had some, for instance, Jim Freeney, his brother Mike is being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Jimmy Freeney was a tremendous three-sport athlete at LaSalle, and he went up to North Adams, Massachusetts, and he was a very revered coach up there. I see Jimmy. I've been to several Hamilton College games at Williams. I see Jimmy up there, and we're still friends. But he couldn't play this would have helped us a lot. He couldn't play his senior year. Another guy, Tony Testa, because of some arcane eligibility rule. I mean, he could play basketball, which he did very well. LaSalle won the Section 6 championship when I was a senior, and in baseball as well. But Jimmy and Tony Testa, who was a very good guard, could not play because of some rule. So we had, and Dennis Rose was another terrific athlete. I think maybe he was hesitant because he didn't think maybe the coaching staff was in love with him or whatever, or maybe the coaching staff. I don't think there's any problems internally. I will have to say, in previous years with black teammates, I don't recall any incidents, but of course, on a racial basis, nothing would have been aimed at me in any case. But I honestly, I do not recall any incidents. Basketball, the senior year, Now, I was not on that team. I had played JV basketball, but they had a terrific team. And the three starters, Dennis Rose, Jimmy Freeney, and Oscar Colvin, were black. They never said anything about having any problems. And Dennis would jokingly try to intimidate guys from from other teams, but they were none of them ever said that and there were a couple other uh, black kids on the JV team. I never heard from anybody that they had a problem. Not to say there weren't, but I never heard that from anyone.
What I want to talk about would pique my interest in reading your bio for the Greater Niagara Sports Hall of Fame is that you got involved with lacrosse, and lacrosse wasn't a high school sport at that point, and
Right.
apparently you excelled at it because then you played at Hamilton College. How did you get involved with lacrosse back then?
Well, living, I knew about lacrosse, and living maybe 5-6 miles from the reservation, I knew about it, but I had never seen a game. So, freshman year at Hamilton, I started a few games as a freshman. It was the first year that freshmen were eligible in Division III, not in Division I. And so I had a decent year, and I was even though I was small, I was a very combative guy. So one of the older guys on the football team, Louis Titel, who was the captain in the next year, and he played lacrosse. And after the season, he says, "What are you going to do in the springtime?" And I had been on the LaSalle baseball team, and started a couple games, but I didn't consider myself to be a very talented baseball player. I was competent, but I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to go out for baseball." He goes, "No, you're not. You're playing lacrosse." I go, "Lacrosse? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, all the football players play lacrosse," which turned out to be a little bit true, right? So, okay, I said, "Okay, that sounds fine." So, the first time that when they had a meeting in February or went down, my coach was a guy named Manfred von Schiller, who was one of the finest. He's still lives up there in Sodus, New York, where he has an orchard. His parents had an orchard. And Manfred had been a terrific athlete at Brockport, and he was a great guy. And he says, "Okay," he was handing out sticks. I said, "Well, I'm a defenseman." He goes, "No, you're not." He goes, "You're a midfielder." And well, I was glad of that, because in the old days, those defense sticks weighed a ton. I would have died, after one quarter play. So anyway, that was Louis Titel more or less forced me to do that. And then I found out I liked it and had some talent with it, and I really worked hard on it. I'll tell you what, Ed, the first game I ever actually saw, I played in. And I played 1 year of JVs and 3 years of varsity. My JV coach was the swim coach, Eric McDonald, who was probably the best motivator I ever played for at any level. And I really loved the game. I really loved it, and I worked hard at it. And one of the things that really helped me was I was asked to play for the Buffalo Lacrosse Club, and the coach was Wes Patterson, who I finally, after several tries, I nominated him for the Greater Niagara Sports Hall of Fame, and he got in last week. Well, Wes was a great player. He went to LaSalle High School. He was a great player at Springfield College. He's in their Hall of Fame. He's in the U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame. He's in the Canadian, but no, people had forgotten him in Niagara Falls, but he was a great friend. He really helped my game as much by just having a lot of confidence in me. We used to have maybe 16, 17 guys. Dave Urick, who was the coach at Hobart and Georgetown for years, he was from West Seneca, I believe. Yeah, but our goalie, uh, it was from Buffalo. He played for St. Lawrence. We had several RIT guys. We had a couple of Indian kids. Well, I think one was a real good player at Brockport. And we go around. We go up in Canada, play, go to Rochester, play, we go out to the Onondaga Reservation and play, you know. And West, my game got a lot. That was just one summer, but my game got a lot better playing with those guys. I mean, some of these people, some of these French Canadian guys and Indians, they tried to take your head off, you know, and they were, they were quite skilled. So I wish I had gotten another year in, but I think the way I was working the next year, I couldn't. But Wes really helped my game. I still have my Patterson of the Tuscarora Indian stick. I mean, it's falling apart, the old fashioned six net. I love it. So that was it. Louis Titel made me play. I worked hard at the game. Wes Patterson really, really helped me. And I had, I tell people, first of all, they don't believe I played football because I'm 5'9". I was 162 at my highest weight, but they do believe I played lacrosse. The thing about lacrosse, at least at that time, was if you could run all day and worked on your skills, you could be an outstanding player. And plus, I was a very good ground ball guy, very good face-off guy, and but I'm not saying. I mean, I had to work, and I was a combative little son of a gun, sometimes too much so, But I don't know. Do you know who Mike Slive was? You probably do.
No,
Well,
name's not familiar.
Mike Slive went to Utica Free Academy. He played lacrosse at Dartmouth College, and he was the commissioner of Conference USA, and then he was the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, and he was the head of the basketball selection committee, and so on and so on. He was the most powerful man in college sports for many, many years. Mike died a few years ago. We got to be good friends. Well, his right-hand man is from Auburn and is now the commissioner of the SEC. What's his name? Not Slaney.
The name escapes me.
Greg Sankey.
Right.
And he was the intramural director at Utica College.
Correct.
Years ago, yeah. So Mike, we're talking one day, and he's talking about lacrosse, and he had the same experience. He was a good quarterback at UFA, but he went to Dartmouth, and he didn't think he'd make the football team, so he played lacrosse. And he said to me, he goes, when we played, he's like 6-7 years older than I. Said, when we played, the game was played on the ground. Now it's played in the air because these kids, their stick skills are unbelievable. But, football players were valued in the game at that time because the ball was on the ground a lot. And you had to have some courage to pick it up because someday you'd get blasted, But anyway, that was my lacrosse experience, and I really, really valued it. It's a funny thing. I don't really enjoy watching the game that much anymore, but it's better now with the shot clock and that, but I certainly enjoyed playing it. It was just terrific.
What about the high school game? Do you enjoy, can you watch high school lacrosse?
High school lacrosse occasionally. Well, my nephew, Mark Pitarresi, was a defenseman on, I think it was 2006, the New Hartford team was the only school from the eastern half of Section 3 ever to win a lacrosse championship, and then they lost to Corning in the regionals, but they had they had some really good players. For instance, I know these kids so well.
It's okay. You don't have to name drop.
All right. Well, the kid was an All-American at Cortland and Division III Player of the Year. So they had some very good players. So I watched it a lot then. I watch it occasionally, especially over here. New Hartford, Don Edick Field is a block from my house. So if there's a game going on, and especially if I know the parents or whatever, I know the kid, I'll go over and watch it. I don't watch it that much.
When you got out of college, did you know at that point you had to take the helmet off and put the lacrosse stick away and hang up the spikes? And what was your feeling at that point? And when did you get into sport journalism? Was it right after college?
Uh not well, you know what? I was the sports editor of the Hamilton Spectator for a couple of years, but that was like, the college paper. That was almost an honorary title. I mean, I didn't have any administrative duties. I I wrote a column, covered some games, so on and so forth. Although I didn't cover many games because I was playing in the fall and in the spring. Maybe I covered some basketball games. I don't even remember. But so I had done that. And then I was teaching for 2 years at New Hartford Junior High. And but I was helping out at Hamilton in football and lacrosse. And so after 2 years, I left the paper. I left teaching, and I went to the Utica papers, and I got hired. Well, first for about 6 months or a little bit more, I was a stringer, and you tell this story, and you got all these old man stories, right? $6.50. I used to cover Syracuse football. 1972, it was Ben Schwartzwalder's last year. It rained or snowed every game at Archbold Stadium, which is pretty much the way it always was. They weren't real good, but they had Joe Ehrman,
Right.
certainly one of the all-time greats from Western New York, and great player. Kind of like practice started when Joe decided to show up. No kidding. I mean, he's over there talking to some guy in a car, and Ben's going, Joe, Joe, Joe. Yeah, okay. Marty Januszkiewicz, who was from Lackawanna, was their star running back. Anyway, so I used to leave my house at 10 o'clock in the morning, and there were no electronics then, so you get back down to the paper maybe 6 o'clock, and then write your story. So you put in 10, 11 hours and get $6.50, and no joke. And guess what? The big boss wouldn't pay tolls because he said I could drive Route 5, and they didn't give you any gas money either. So it was great experience. And you know what, Ed? I look back and I was a know-it-all. I thought I knew football really well and that, and I was 23, 24 years old, and I was way too full of myself, but that's how I got started. And then Bill Higgin, who was a terrific guy and had a different approach to sports coverage than the old timers at the paper had, hired me as a $98 a week clerk. Which you could live on that then. You actually could. My brother and I shared an apartment, and so that was the start. And then a year later, I went over to the morning paper as a full-fledged reporter, and I spent many, many years there. And I always say, like, there were some tough times, but all that stuff turned into good war stories. And I met 10,000 people. I'm glad I met 9,995 of them,
Well, you're always going to get those five out of there. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
You still continue. You still dabble doing some sports, writing an outdoor column. Unfortunately, you're no longer with the Utica newspapers, the OD, and
Yeah.
now moved over to the Rome Sentinel. to the people, the youngsters watching this, what's changed with journalism over the last 20 years?
Oh gosh. When this electronic revolution began, um, people would say, well, it's okay. It's just going to be the platform's going to be different, but everything else will be the same. Well, I have found that not to be true. For one thing, I mean, there's just okay. So the Utica Observer Dispatch still prints. Okay, they don't print every day. Uh, they're online. Okay, we when I started there, I was there till 1:30 in the morning. I'd get the Dodgers score. One of my primary duties, a lot of them, but get the Dodgers and San Francisco Giants score in the paper, right? And you had till 1:30. Um, that no longer is true. Nobody's there to put that in the paper. There's so many differences, but I, there even the big papers do not have the manpower that they used to have. They can't cover as much. They can't cover as thoroughly. You might have terrific writers, people who are really talented, but you don't have right now. In 1987, when the Utica newspapers merged, and we were Gannett papers, but there were two papers. So they decided to make one morning paper, which fine. There were 88 people in the newsroom and somewhere around 350 people in the enterprise. Today, there are 5 people in the newsroom, and there is no newsroom. There is an office way downtown, but nobody goes there, right? So there's no, if we were working, we were sports colleagues, you and I could walk over to you and say, do you know this guy? So on and so forth, or who can I get a hold of that? All that kind of stuff. That's all gone. You people, you can call her. It's not the same by any means. But anyway, the 5 people. You got an editor, 2 news people, 1 sports guy, and a photographer. We used to have 6 photographers. It's so different. It's hard to explain. And here's another thing. I write a story. It goes to the editor, and he goes, well, John, what about this? You got the coach from UFA. You got his name spelled this way. Oh yeah, geez, okay, yeah. So then he sends it over to the copy desk, and the copy desk guy goes, "Hey, John, you got the game at UFA. It's at Henninger, right?" Oh, okay, yeah, okay, right. So now, whatever. I hope I didn't make too many mistakes like that, but I made them. Now it goes to a guy in Austin, Texas, never been within 1,000 miles of Utica, New York, right? Has never heard of Brinkerhoff Avenue or Genesee Street or whatever, right? It absolutely positively affects the quality in a negative way. I couldn't in good conscience tell a college kid to get into business. Yeah. I mean, there's still positions and there's still people doing good work, but it's a much, much smaller. I mean, I don't know if I understand this. The New York Times farmed out their sports department. They don't actually have a sports department. It's done off-site by an associated company or whatever. I mean, what? I mean, like, I don't get it. And but I will say, like the Sentinel has done a decent job moving into Utica, and their publisher, I was at a talk that he was at, Brad Waters. That here's the thing: a paper, an independent paper like that, has a better chance of doing well than one that's part of a large corporation, because they don't have to satisfy stockholders. The Waters family has owned the Rome Sentinel, and now they just call it the Sentinel or the Daily Sentinel. They have owned that paper since 1864. And so they only have to keep themselves happy. And I think there's a bunch of other papers in that category. But you look at the Providence Journal, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, even the Boston Globe. None of these sports sections are anywhere near what they used to be.
You're a member of a couple of Hall of Fames, the New York State Outdoorsman Hall of Fame that you went in over 20 years ago. Then you went into the Greater Utica Sports Hall of Fame in 2016. What does it mean to you to go into the Greater Niagara Sports Hall of Fame in the next couple of weeks?
People say, when I say what I really feel, people say it's rude or ungrateful or whatever. I'm going like, what am I doing here? I look at my brother, my father, Joe Colosi, Billy Bradshaw, Vic Siegels, Mickey Kearns, Henry Nichols, people I grew up with, or Henry was actually, Henry's an all-time great basketball official, and he's a Niagara Falls guy, and all those guys, they belong there. I'm in terms of athletic terms, I'm being an athlete, I'm nowhere near those guys. So I'm honestly, I want to be gracious and grateful, and I am, but I go like, are people going like, gosh, what's he doing here? But I suppose you can get in. Other people are in there for things in support of athletics. When I don't know if you ever heard of Monsignor Francis Willenberg, but he was a priest in the Utica area for many, many years and very beloved guy. And he was a great basketball player at St. Aloysius Academy in Rome. He played with Pat Riley's older brother, who went on to the NFL. And Monsignor Willenberg was a freshman at Niagara when my father was a senior, and he dearly loved my father. And Willenberg was a very, very good basketball player. But that after freshman year, he went into seminary. So he's been a priest in Utica. He's gone now, but he's been a priest in Utica for 50 years. And he's always pushing me for the Hall of Fame, like Monsignor, but, it happened. So, I'm very grateful, and I'm glad to be joining my friends. A lot of these guys I've been friends with since I was 9 years old. We have a group: Vic Siegels, Mickey Kearns, Billy Bradshaw, my brother, Tooch Pino, Mickey Kearns, a bunch of them that I have been friends with and played sports with since we were 9 years old. And so that's 67 years, so, and we're tight, and we talk to each other all the time. We get together for golf a couple times. Well, they play golf, I play hack, so, but it's just a wonderful thing. I mean, it's a terrific thing, but I don't, as an athlete, I never put myself in their class. Although, they would have to put up with some stuff from me when we played against each other, for sure, But they were great teammates too.
John, we talked about a lot of things so far. What would you like to talk about that I haven't brought up?
Well, You know, I just my belief in the value of athletics is very, very strong. And I get I all the stuff we talked about and on the sandlots and junior high and uh, uh, high school and college, and then playing some stuff afterwards as well. And I just have a great uh, love of sports in general and what they can do for people playing on a team and be. I always like, and again, my college teammates, many of them I'm still friends with and speak to frequently. We had a couple very, very good teams at Hamilton that we have reunions. Some of the guys are getting pretty long on the tooth, but the friendships built, and they say, oh, sports don't build character; they reveal character. I think that's probably true, but it can build character as well. All those things that I just like the positive aspect of competitive sports. I mean, there are negative aspects for sure, but what they can do, I've seen kids just blossom because maybe they were a little timid or maybe they were a little whatever, and develop into leaders because they competed and got better and did what they had to do to improve. So the big thing for me is I love the idea of the positive things that competitive athletics could bring to a kid's life.
One final question. When you're up induction night in front of all those people and you're at the podium, how are you going to be feeling and what are you going to be saying?
Much of the I'll be, I've spoken in front of a lot of groups. I mean, many times. I'm still get nervous about it, and I don't think I've ever particularly became very good at it. But so I'll be a little nervous, and also Joel Hoke has warned me several times. You got 5 minutes, 5 minutes. So I got it down to about 6 right now. But I'll be fumbling that a little bit. So, but I'm gonna talk about what I told you on the sidelines at Hyde Park Stadium and on from there, and all the guys that I competed with and against. And it's a great thing too, is like you compete against guys, and sometimes I don't know I ever hated anybody's guts, but you get angry or whatever. But 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, it's like if you're not friends, at least you are common. So I got, how I got into it and some of the great experiences I had. And I'm going to try to mention as many teammates as I can in that short period of time, because I had a lot of teammates that I really loved, so I guess that's it, how I got into it and why I love it. And I'll be nervous. I had to give a long speech at Hamilton a couple of years ago, the class analyst speech, which is a very big honor. But once I got going, I was like, and I remember I sweated right through my sport jacket, so that's probably what's going to happen.
John, this has been a lot of fun. I want to thank you so much. Congratulations on your upcoming induction with the Greater Niagara Sports Hall of Fame. Enjoyed this conversation. I wish you well, be well, and thanks again.
Ed, thanks a million. I appreciate it. And keep in touch, please. You know what? I'm going to try to encourage these other guys to get back a hold of you.